It's ethereal. These shoes are otherworldly. But that's not all. Order now, and Sam Baltrusis will throw in a shoulder rub.
You get free EVPs with the shoes. Did you do that?
I'm surprised, with all the dampness last night, we weren't hearing the squeaky shoes.
No, we wouldn't.
I cannot believe we did not have squeaky shoes, and I want to thank everybody that did not wear flip-flops. I know, but people always try to wear flip-flops, and when you're walking around and because we're trying to do EVP work, it's bonkers. Yeah, he knows who I'm talking about.
They're not flip-flops, they're Birkenstocks, David. They're very comfortable.
All right, well, obviously, you guys have come here to investigate the paranormal. I'll introduce our sidekicks here. If you're not familiar, this handsome young fellow to my immediate right is Sam Baltrusis. Sam is a direct descendant of Lizzie Borden, and if that's not bad enough, Eileen Mornos. That's right. Crazy sitting right here on stage with us, folks. So if anybody knows about criminal activity, murder, death in prisons, this is the guy to go to tonight. Sam had a lot of crazy activity last night. He's also involved in Salem heavily with the ghost tours. He's been a very prolific author. How many books do you have out now? 782?
I have 15 books altogether. My most recent is Ghosts of the American Revolution, which I sold out in like 2 minutes.
Wow.
At my table in the back. So.
Well, if you only brought 3 copies, don't be that. That's great. You never know the group, right? You're like, oh, there's gonna be 40 people. I'll bring 8 books, and they sell out in like 8 seconds.
Yeah,
So that's very cool. But Sam has written all types of great books. He appears on many of the different documentaries, and he got a chance to appear with Chris and I on the Curse of Lizzie Borden. Originally, you were booked to just be like a 5-minute talking head as the relative of Lizzie, right?
Yeah, so when I first came on Curse of Lizzie Borden, I was supposed to be a talking head, and I sit down on the couch, and I see Dave Schrader and Chris, and I'm like, okay. And what was happening is I was getting connecting with Eliza Borden, who I never really connected with as a clairvoyant, or I say I identify more as a psychic medium now. And it just kind of took off from there. And it was so surreal doing the Holzer method, which is trance channeling with the guy from the Holzer file. So it was definitely a really life-changing experience. But I'm really grateful that these two were with me, because I wouldn't have been able to go there the way I was able to go there in Curse of Lizzie Borden.
Well, then we were lucky enough that the guy went from being supposed to be a 5-minute talking head that after he started connecting to stuff, Chris and I looked at each other and we talked to the director. We're like, we need to keep Sam. He's great, plus he cries a lot. Which is awesome, because his emotion is so human. And sometimes when you're doing this all the time, you kind of almost have that removal, right, from it. You're not as he was a great texture. He was the audience connection for this. So we had the investigators, we had the psychics, we had the family connection, and then we had Luann, who was getting these amazing EVP in the place. So very cool opportunity, and we'll talk more about that. Now, this guy sitting to the left of me, we began our relationship in 2006. There was a little show he had on over in the British Empire known as Dead Famous. And I got my Entertainment Weekly, and I'm sitting on my toilet reading it. And it's Chris Fleming from Chicago, Illinois. So I pull up my Facebook and I send him a message. And then I sent him 2 more, and then he finally responded. And then I just kept messaging him until he became my best friend. And that is really how we met. I hired him on to do our first event at the Stanley Hotel with Jason and Grant and the team from TAPS and Chris and Patrick Burns, and had a fun time. And here's, it's a really weird anchor to this all. So we're good friends with Patrick Burns from the TV show Haunting Evidence. Good buddies with Sam. Patrick Burns, Sam, myself, Chris, all from this area, all from the Chicagoland area, and never knew each other growing up. As a matter of fact, were you at the Weird Al signing as well? No. Flip side, I've got pictures of me in line to meet Weird Al Yankovic in like 1988 or 89, and Patrick Burns is like 4 people behind me in line. And yeah, that's how we realized we were from the same area, because we both posted at the same time. Very weird stuff. But speaking of weird stuff, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Fleming.
Thank you. These guys are just amazing. I could say so much about both of them, especially with Sam. We got to work with him. I've known Dave for a very long time. I've been putting on these events now for 3 years, You know, how many have been to other paranormal access events? Please raise your hands. Okay, wonderful. And the whole thing about that is, as you see here, is just the friendship, having fun with you guys. You know, we're all on the same level. You know, even though we're high up here with the chairs, just so you can see us. That's it. I want everybody to get along, everybody to share conversations, their experiences. You know, we're all friends, because all three of us are just as passionate about this stuff as you guys are. I mean, you see when I get excited about the EVPs, it's like I got my first EVP. It's always exciting to me because it's phenomenal. And I think that's one of the things that we connected, because like Dave and I became friends because we both were so passionate about this. There's times you don't make any money at all, you're struggling in life, but you do it because you just love it. And there's great purpose. There's people like yourself that have come here that have had experiences you want to share with somebody. We want to share you ours, you share yours with us. And that's what it's all about. And then here's the thing is unique about Sam, and I admire about him. I mean, God, he's written 15 books, I haven't written one. You know, that's someone that is really organized and very dedicated to something that they do. They're just going to go do it. I sit there and go, oh, it's going to take forever, right? But when I first got to meet Sam, and we were doing the Curse of Lizzie Borden, you know, it's funny, he says the talking head. First time I did TV, he said, oh, we're going to go shoot a talking head. I said, what, you guys got a talking head? Like, seriously.
You may ask yourself, how did we book that? You may ask yourself, what is a spirit?
So I thought they had a ghost of a head, a floating head, at a location we were going to. It was the first time I did TV, back in 2003.
Mecca hi, Mecca hi, Chris. Holy shit, they've got zombie!
Are there any drunken heads?
Yes.
You know? So when he said talking head, I had to tell you that. But when we were working together, we were having all this stuff happen while he's giving his interview, and he's sharing some of the history, and all of a sudden I'm feeling some spirits come into the room, and I'm standing behind Sam, and I go, Dave, why is they're walking in as he's talking? And then I go, Sam, there's a spirit. He goes, oh, I know. It's like I didn't want to interrupt him. But he was feeling, you know, mutual. We were both experiencing it. So for me, I was like, oh, this guy's for real. I mean, this guy's, he has abilities. So when we did the seance, it was remarkable because we looked around the room and it's like, guys, we're all here for a reason. Sam's here for a reason. Rand's here for a reason. Dave's here for a reason. And you guys saw what happened during the seance. And I'm telling you, it's real.
This is not the reason. $60.
Right.
That's all we each got. It's a
Yeah.
tough gig, but we took it.
And that's the thing, is that you don't get a lot of money for doing what you do. But they said to me during the seance, they said, what are you going to do? You're going to channel. I said, no, you know, Sam channeled earlier, and if I channel, people are like, oh, Chris is channeling again. I said, I want spirits to come through and see if they go through Dave and go through Luann. He said, are you going to tell them? I said, no, I'm not going to tell them. Because if I tell Dave, he's going to shut down, and it may not happen. And it did happen. So there's a lot of stuff that Dave's like, I never want to experience that again. But the thing was, everybody that was in the room, there's stuff that Sam did, communicating with some of the spirits, helping some of the spirits, having them come through, something Luann did, something Dave did, and I did. And it's like, it's a way how the universe brings everybody together to make that connection.
Yep. Yeah, so with that said, I mean, when looking at I feel like that it was kind of in my cards to work with you guys. And so when I came in as a talking head, I knew that it was going to be more than just a talking head. And but with that said, I do think that our group together, there's an energy here that that really works well together. It's very complementary. And you know, so I wouldn't have been able to do what I was able to do on that couch at the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast without Chris getting behind me. And I think that
Wait a minute. Let that last sentence just soak in.
What did I say?
I wouldn't be able to do what I did on that couch without Chris standing behind me. How many people have not yet seen The Curse of Lizzie Borden? How many are now going to tune in because of what you just heard?
All right, so I'm so back. So to give you an idea, so when I do a thing called the Crystal Shield of Protection. And so I was doing it on the Curse of Lizzie Borden, and I was like doing my chanting. So apparently that is vagina in American Sign Language. And so I'm notoriously known for my like sexual, non-sexual innuendo. So sorry about that.
Dave, there's ghosts everywhere! Sam, don't worry, I'll hold them back!
But getting to like all serious, like what I feel I was watching a certain show that just came out last night. And I think that what was so powerful about Lizzie Borden and about this team together is that it's pushing the envelope forward to a different direction than paranormal television. And you know, I think that not everybody got it, but the people that got it, and a lot of you guys are in this room, see that that's the next direction, is going into the field, being passionate about it, telling the stories of my ancestors, people that I'm related to. And so this was very personal, and it was also a lot of fun, but also life-changing in many ways.
And being able to go in there, and Chris and I had been to the Lizzie Borden house before on separate occasions, and both had very weird, kind of life-altering experiences. And when they asked us to come back in and do this, it was kind of first they approached me, they're like, Dave, we have this idea. So we've got this woman, Luann Jolly, who gets really good EVP there. We want you to pair up with her. Do you know of a good medium? No, but I do know Chris Fleming. And I said, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. Chris Fleming and I have been friends for 16 years. We've never really got to work as an investigative duo on TV. We've always, we did Paranormal Challenge a couple times and Ghost Adventures Live, but we were never in the same place at the same time. So for them to give us this opportunity, they were like, all right, do you think Chris will do it? And it was like a week or so before shooting. And I'm like, well, you gotta call Chris and find out. And he luckily jumped on board to be a part of it at the last minute, and we were able to create this great moment to go back there. And both came in with this kind of anxiety about what had happened before. And I think that kind of fed the energy of the location. And then see Sam tap in, and he was so eerily accurate with things, and then having somebody who's tapping in, and this is rare, I gotta tell you, because I've been to places with Chris and other mediums before, where some mediums tapped in and they're flying monkeys and unicorns, and Chris is like, I don't know what they're seeing. And he's not putting them down, but he's like, I am not sharing this experience at all. And then when Sam started hitting, and Chris is standing behind him going, and nodding, what was really interesting was at one point Chris is standing there and he's like, I gotta go outside, I'm gonna get sick, I don't feel good. And he leaves. And we're all just kind of settled down, and we're like, all right. And Sam goes, can I ask a personal question? I go, yeah. And he goes, do you know somebody named Reggie? And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, there's this really big spirit here, almost like an angel, but he's related to Chris somehow. His name is Reggie. And I go, okay, what about it? And he goes, well, he's here for Chris, but not because of Chris. He's here to give Chris support because somebody else is going through something. I'm like, okay, well, it interested me that he knew Chris's dad's name, who passed away a few years ago. Now, again, the skeptic side of me is Chris has been very open about it on social media, and he shared videos, so maybe Sam had seen that, I don't know. Well, we find out the next day, when we go back to film the next day, Chris is just sitting there, and he's all washed with color, and he's just kind of, he's there to do the job that he's hired to do, but you can see his mind was about 100 miles away. And I go up to him, and I'm like, hey, buddy, what's wrong?
Yeah, I got, there was a couple things that happened, but the biggest was I got the call that my mom collapsed, and she was in emergency, and they got a little emotional. And they don't know what happened, but I'm sitting there in the Lizzie Borden house, I'm going shit, because the girl I was dating at the time also called me. She had this nightmare that someone come running into the house with a big knife and started, wanting to kill her daughter, kill her cat, and kill her. And the morning before, I woke up and there was this black mass that was right above me. And I kicked at it, I said, oh wow, we're gonna be doing some dark stuff going to Lizzie Borden house, which we did come in contact with. So I had an encounter with this thing before we confronted it. The girl I was dating at the time had something to try to attack her. I said, okay, so we're dealing with something that is really intertwined, that is trying to get back at me. And then when I got the call about my mom, because they want to know what your weakness is, and that's one of my weaknesses, is my mom. I'm like, shit. Dave says, do you want to go home? I said, that's what it wants me to do. It wants me to leave. So I can't. I have to be here. I have a responsibility. Now we know why I'm here. I'm not going to fall for that. Like, even though I called, make sure to see my mom's gonna be okay, I said, yeah, we think she'll be okay. She ended up breaking, it was shattered her hip. She had to have reconstruction in her entire hip, which was, she was in the hospital for 3.5 months, actually. The show says she got out soon was fine. No, she was in there for 3.5 months. So, what is remarkable, though, is when I first arrived at the hotel, I got in late, it was delayed, I came in the morning, and I woke up in the morning, I said, Dad, I said, you know, got this case, you know, we always play this game, I just want to let you know I love you, and usually he'll respond in some fashion with I love you back. I said, but if you want to be around while we're doing this, because we're going to be dealing with some dark stuff. So Sam comes into the room, he said, Chris, can I ask you a question? He says, what? He goes, I'm getting this feeling of a man, everything, you know, your father coming through, and I'm sitting there going, okay. And he says, he's like saying, I love you. And I'm like, oh my God. And those that know my story know that my dad always brings that back to me in some shape or form. Well, I hadn't told them that, so I knew what Sam was saying was real. Because I just said something to my dad that morning in prayer, and he's responding through Sam, but then also my dad knew this thing was going to happen with my mom. So it's amazing how all this is connected, but that it was also connecting with each one of us and delivering messages. So that's when I knew that I could trust Sam working with us, that what we were going to be confronting. And that's always important, is that, and you guys know as a paranormal team, you want to align yourself with individuals that you can trust and that are good at what they do. If someone's good at audio, good at electromagnetic fields, whatever it is, that they're really good at that, so you can rely on them. You guys are all doing your responsibilities. I said, okay, we got this team that's building, we're going to go to battle. You know?
And when he had felt that something, the spirit was there for Chris, but to kind of support Chris through what was happening to another family member, it was around that time, the day before, that Chris's mom had collapsed in the garage, right? So it was, kitchen, yeah, it was very crazy that all this took place. But it's so sweet that you sensed his dad coming through and says, I love you. My dad, when he dies, I'll know that you know when he comes up and he goes, why is he whacking you in the forehead with a spoon? And going, did you leave the lights on? Did you leave the lights on? That's how I'll know my dad's coming through. He's sitting in the second row looking at me like, shut the fuck up. I mean, you guys can see him too, right?
He's got a green shirt on.
Yeah, exactly. So, how many people have not had a chance to see The Curse of Lizzie Borden yet? Can you please just go? We don't have time to get this shit. It's so depressing. Why would you even be here? Watch it. It's on Discovery Plus. It's on, might be on Travel Channel now. Check it out. And it's one of the shock docs I'm very proud to be a part of. And it's weird because when you're doing it, you're putting it together, you don't know what it's going to look like at the end. You know your experiences, but you're also trusting that the production's not going to chop it into something weird, which we've all been a part of at one point or another. How many people watch the show Haunted Hospitals? Did you guys see the episode I appeared on for Haunted Hospitals? So, did you see it or no? So, first of all, it says it was like 1988. Dave goes to the hospital in New York. I don't know why he'd lie about that. It was like 2014 and I was in Minnesota. So I don't know why they would change that. And this was their reasoning to me. Well, we couldn't get a licensing agreement to show the outside of the hospital you were in, but we could for the hospital in New York. Okay. So then they started telling the story, and one of my friends in Canada saw it when it first came out, and they videotaped the clip that they thought was really funny. Because they cut to me as I'm telling the ghost story, and I'm like, I wasn't afraid. I was really unnerved by the situation and wished I could help the ghosts. And then it cuts to the reenactment, and I'm in the bed going, no! Oh my God, no! What are they doing? And it had just cut for me going, I wasn't afraid, right? So it's either like very comical, like they're showing the real answer, but I wasn't. I was high as a kite on morphine. I was not terrified. I was just blown away. Then they go, Dave's longtime producer and co-host of the radio show came to visit. Tim looks like me. Short, round, and bald. And they show a 6'3" NFL black player, right? Strapping young buck, and he's like, how you doing, Dave? Everything okay? And I'm like, Tim, it finally got you right on TV. So TV's not always really good about the details. So we were all kind of worried, especially because there were things that they didn't film that we thought were compelling, like the fact that this very good camera crew who had been around and filmed all these documentaries and shows had been around doing this stuff, and their cameras are powering off independently. And they've all got different battery packs, and they're shutting down. Then the stationary cameras they have up in the corners, the GoPros, are shutting off, and they've got extended life batteries. They just turned them on, and after 90 minutes they turn off. And they could not explain it. And we're talking to them like, we should be filming this and talking about this. So we filmed parts of us talking to the crew, because that was powerful. The crew's like, I don't know what's happening. This does not happen to our equipment. So we were having problems with that. Then for the ghost hunt, they literally locked us in. They set up a whole table, gave us all of our equipment, put in all new batteries, and then left. And we had no way to get in touch with them. All of our equipment failed within about 15 minutes of startup.
Every single battery, even the backup batteries.
Yeah, dead. So then Chris goes, because all the cameras they left us, no good. Chris goes, I brought my own camera and I powered the battery. I go, I did too, I'll go up and get it. So I've got a brand new camera, brand new battery. I just charged up there. We both get about 10 minutes of footage and our camera's shut down. So that's why there's very little of the actual ghost hunts,
Several.
because nothing would work in that house, and that was really unsettling to us. So unfortunately, not all production companies understand the importance of some of the aspects we see important on TV, which can be really frustrating. I was still very proud of what they presented, but there's some cool stuff that didn't make it. But then talking about the fact, I was joking with Chris, I'm like, Sam's great, he cries a lot, because he was very emotional. This is his family, this is gonna be powerful. This isn't just people walking through this. And then after Chris has the experience, and I go to Chris, I go, do you wanna do this? Should we just pull the plug on this? If our families are gonna start getting affected by this. And Chris goes, no, we're gonna do this, we gotta do it. So then they're like, can we film this conversation? We're like, sure. So as soon as the cameras go on, and then you start to realize the depth of what you're about to do, right? It's one thing when you're sitting there talking to your buddy, all of a sudden when the cameras go on and you realize you're now going to film what is about to happen to you, and knowing that your family may be now at risk. As I start talking about it and telling, and I'm like, and then you guys should know that what happened was, Chris and Bob collapsed, and then Sam's over there going, holding it together. We're all doing, everybody else starts crying, and Chris is the only one, and he's looking at us like, oh, fuck. Because it's his mom, and we're all, let's go home. No, we're going to stay, we're going to see this through. And we did, and it was a remarkable experience, so much energy. And to have that channeling happen, you have to be careful when you're doing a paranormal investigation of what you say. I said out loud, if you need to use our energy in any way to make communication, do so. Without realizing that Chris had also thrown me under the spiritual bus by telling the ghosts,
you should really channel through Dave Schrader, leave me alone tonight.
As we were sitting there doing the seance and my arm started twitching, I legitimately thought I was having like an MS problem or something, and I don't have MS, and I couldn't understand. My whole arm is shaking and tremoring. Yeah, at first I thought it was Chris because we're all holding hands, and I'm like, what the hell's wrong? Why is he crappie flopping my palm? And I realized it's me, and I'm just trying to stay in the minute because you don't want to ruin, you're filming the scene, and I don't want to take anybody else out of it. And one of the things that unfortunately you don't hear as well, when we first started and we're talking underneath the table, like it's knocking on the underside of our table going around us. And that was new to me because I didn't know what to expect with a seance, right? I mean, we need like crystal balls and turbines and, how are we going to do this? And to have that knocking start, and then as we're going through this thing and Chris is inviting it to communicate and my arm starts jerking, Chris goes, I know what this is. I've seen this before. Give me a pen and paper. And I'm like, what's he going to do? Right? And then all of a sudden he starts jamming the pen in my hand. And he goes, just go with it, man. Just go with it. And I'm like, oh, no, I don't like this. Because it literally felt like something was forcing my hand and arm to do things I did not want. And he was trying to calm me down. My biggest regret is I wish I would have lowered that shield a little bit and allowed the messages to be a little bit more clear. A, so we'd have better messages, and B, because at my age, fighting something for 20 minutes that's trying to come through you, my neck, shoulder, and back felt like somebody beat me with a 2x4 for 3 hours after that. And I was in a wreck for a couple, I don't know, probably 3-4 days. What's really funny is I go off about 2 months later to film this new TV series with Cindy Keza. We go out there, and on one of the episodes, while we're doing something, and they ask me to kind of open up. Sure, you know, I know now what to watch for, and there's no paper, there's no pen, there's no table in front of me, I'm fine, right? And I open up, and it's powerful. And I get done, and I'm like, Chris, I gotta tell you. And he goes, oh yeah, I meant to tell you. You're kind of open now, so things can happen. I should have probably walked you through that and showed you how to close down. I guess I didn't sign up for the $49.99 how to close down your psychic bubble that Chris Fleming has opened lesson yet. But we had so the series was very cool because I had opened up that way. I had a couple of really compelling pieces happen in this new series. Cindy started kind of trying to shield me a little bit more as the series progressed because I still, you know, I've tried to clear and keep myself balanced with that and be careful what I do or say when I go into these locations now because I'm certainly much more aware of how open we all really are when we put ourselves into this setting. So you've got to be careful. Are there any questions regarding the Curse of Lizzie Borden, any of our work on any of the other TV shows, anything? Yes?
I was wondering, you spent the night in the stepmother's bedroom, right?
Me or Chris?
At the Lizzie Borden house?
I actually left. I was supposed to spend the entire night.
Okay.
And because we no longer had any cameras, I'm like, what's the point? They want us to spend the night here? I need to get some sleep. And I know if I sleep here, I'm not going to get any sleep, but I'm not going to be able to document.
The weirdest thing is I am in no way, shape, or form.
They stayed, I left. I went back to the hotel.
And when I was watching this thing, and they went into Lizzie Borden's stepmom's room, the hair on the back of my neck just stood up. And I'm like, that room is freaking me out. And I don't know why. No other rooms did, not even the couch where he was all packed up and stuff. But as soon as you guys went into her bedroom, I was like, ooh. And I was like, I thought you spent the night there.
I was supposed to, but like I said, I went, what's the point of me spending the night here? I got no camera to film it, you know? And I don't know if you guys know, but I had been to the house 10 years before, maybe around 2010, when I did an episode of Psychic Kids. They took us to the house. They didn't tell us where we're going. They said, Chris, do you want to know where we're going? I said, no, I don't want to know where we're going, just like the kids aren't knowing. And so we walked around the house, did like a cold walkthrough, whatever's coming through is coming through. And I always wanted to go back there because there was 2 things that happened, which is one of the reasons that Dave, yes, I definitely want to do this. I've always wanted to go back. The first thing was when we first went to the second floor with the kids, all of a sudden we smelled this like rotted flesh. It was horrific. We started gagging. I raced to the bathroom where I was almost going to vomit. It was so horrific. And the kids were like, what the hell? And then all of a sudden I started getting chest pains. And I thought I was having a heart attack. I collapsed to the floor. The cameraman was like, should I call 911? I'm like, ah. And I realized, wait a minute, maybe I'm feeling something that happened to somebody, right? So I realized I have to take myself, and these guys know, when you have something attach itself to you, and either if it's something that's trying to get at you, or you're feeling how the entity or spirit died, you remove yourself from the location. So I quickly raced outside. I had tears of pain coming down, and Edie says, what happened? Well, what's ironic is, if you study this, when you get bludgeons to the head, the brain shuts down, right? But the heart still pumps blood. Now the heart is pumping blood to the brain won't receive it goes into cardiac arrest. So what I was feeling was that either with Andrew Borden or his wife, they were having this major chest pains and heart explode. So to me, it was like I always wanted to go back there. Plus, when I recorded on camera after the crew left from Psychic Kids. I said, we're all going to go eat at this restaurant. I had a rental car. I said, I want to stay in here. I want to try to make contact. So did you do it? Did you do it? He was like, no, it wasn't me, right? I caught that on my camera by myself on that second floor. They didn't use it in Psychic Kids, but they used it in this documentary. So that place, as Sam knows, we'll have him maybe talk a little bit more about that place, is so active. People will hear direct voice phenomena with their own ears, or they will catch it on a recorder. And like Dave said, with all the batteries going dead, we had drawers that were opening up. I'm in the room going, wait a minute, I just walked by earlier. The drawers weren't open, so I closed the drawers. I'm like, all right, watch these drawers. I come back, and they're open again. Cabinets would open, some slight cabinets. So I'm telling the director, I said, cabinets and the drawers are opening. We need to film this. Oh, well, we're filming an interview. I'm like, but this is paranormal. I said, we need to have cameras in here to catch these things opening. They're trying to tell us that there's something hidden.
But in their defense, they were interviewing me.
Then I had to turn the cameras away, I'm sorry.
All right, Sam, so talk to us about the house a little bit, and then if there's any other questions, feel free to raise your hand.
So the room that you're referring to is where Abby Borden was murdered, and so that's called the John Morse room now. To give you some backstory to me, so when I walk into that room, even before I do the whole backstory, I try to go into locations cold, which is what I do. Even here at Old Joliet Prison, I didn't know anything about the spirits here, but I wanted to kind of go in cold. So this is long before I knew I was related. I walk into the John Morse room and I burst into tears, which apparently is very easy for me to do.
But and why we love him.
Yeah, exactly. I cry on cue, and of course, I'm like very ugly crying too. But anyway, so that room is really significant. There's a lot of energy there. So that's probably what you're picking up on. As someone that's sensitive, there's just a lot of energy. That's where she was murdered. What I get from that room specifically is when I connect with Abby, which I didn't really do during the filming of Curse of Lizzie Borden, is she loved the person that killed her, and she's heartbroken. She's like, I love you, and like then meanwhile, probably Lizzie was killing her. And you and I talked a little bit last night about what I think is really going on, and this is sort of like the underlying core of what the Curse of Lizzie Borden is. I think that she was taken over by a dark force, and she actually committed the crime.
And the cousin, right?
And,
Eliza?
Yeah, and Eliza as well. That's my theory, and a lot of people would strongly disagree with that. I have not known that I was related to the Borden family most of my life. My mom is retired. She did Ancestry.com, and she found out that we're tied not only to Lizzie Borden once, but twice. And the common connector is a woman named Innocent Cornell Borden. And the reason why she got the name Innocent is her father was accused of murdering his mother. And there's a lot of connections to Innocent Cornell Borden, including Lizzie Borden, including Eileen Wuornos. We just found out this summer doing DNA testing that Marilyn Monroe is also connected to us. So there's all these curse cases that are not as famous as Eileen Wuornos, like Sarah Maria Cornell, who was a middle girl who was murdered by Ephraim Avery, who was a minister, a Methodist minister. And we're also, of course, Eliza Borden. So that house, I was terrified of the house. I would have dreams over and over again before I even would walk. And I walked in, I'm like, oh, that's from my dreams. And I will say, leading up to the investigation, I was on Dave's radio show multiple times, and every time we would talk about my books or whatever, Lizzie Borden always came up. So when I was asked to be a part of the show, like who's on the show, and they said Dave Schrader, they actually did let me know that Chris Fleming was a part of it, because I don't think he was actually a part of it yet. I wasn't surprised. It was kind of like I was being prepped for this for my entire life. Yeah, so it was very powerful. What was also really kind of intense about this investigation, I've investigated her many times, but this was right before the owner, her name's Leanne, and she was a lovely, lovely lady, and she ran the property, and she passed away shortly after we filmed. So there's new ownership, so things are different at the house now. I do think that people ask me, did we cross over the spirits? We definitely did cross over many, many spirits at the seance. And they didn't show all the spirits that we crossed over.
Talk about that, because the thing, because
Sam played a really big part in this too. And there was so much that went on during the seance that we even had messages coming through for each loved one. Some messages for Dave, some for Sam. We got a little emotional, and obviously they cut that out. But it was like I said, Sam, I'd like to help spirits cross over and stuff like that, so let's do this together. And we're having spirits come through, not just from the Lizzie Borden house, but other spirits that were in the neighborhood that were coming forth. But then also, we were using a device, ITC device, to hear responses. So we ask questions and it will respond back. Because I love to use ITC during a seance, so you don't rely just on the mediums. You actually hear the communication of the spirits coming back and what they're getting and saying. It's remarkable. And as Sam and I were doing this, you're hearing the spirits talk through the ITC. And then also, I see in my mind's eye, I start to see this light and this angel come, beautiful angel. And so I said, what do you see now? We see angel. I said, describe the angel, blonde hair. And so it started giving us little details about this angel. I saw the rough cut, and they had bits and pieces of that in there. And then when the final aired, it wasn't in there. I'm like, why did they take that out? Because you see a little bit of emotions of us with these spirits helping them, being human, but also going further than most seances and investigations do. We're actually helping the spirits. But then when you have the light side of heaven and the angels coming forward, which is amazing rather than just all the dark, I wish they would have left that in. Because it's always dark, 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 dark. You see the paranormal. We know, you don't always get dark. You guys, tonight, some of you that may have investigated with me last night saw some of the angels coming through, speaking to us, talking about nice spirits, not always negative spirits. And wouldn't you love to see more of that in some of the shows?
Yeah.
You know, some of the angels or some of the other stuff, spirits that are healing and, you know, so I'm just going to keep rambling, but I just wanted to add that because he helped with a lot of that.
Well, and on their side, though, they have to be careful because religion is a hot button.
Right.
And it pisses a lot of people off. Oh, I want to watch a ghost show. I don't want to watch any religion and angels. That's bullshit. Let's just get to the demons. And that's kind of the attitude of a lot of fan base. So they have to kind of watch it. However, I will say I was impressed that they allowed me to do clearing prayers and they kept it in the show, which is really rare for a paranormal show to allow, and I think we did too, that they kept in there.
So to kind of give some of those, with the seance, what was going on spiritually? So we were kind of on another plane, and I was having full-blown conversations with Chris on another plane, and I'm like, that wasn't on camera, and I'm good friends with the producer, Katie Rothman, and she's like, no, like you guys were, your eyes were closed, and you were in another realm. What was also happening, we brought the dark entity to the table, which is what Luann was dealing with, and also Dave as well, I believe. And then we were, after we kind of pushed the negative energy to the side, we were able to clear a path for the spirits to cross. And I'll tell you, there were dozens of spirits that were standing behind me. I was kind of like the bait for the spirits. I was kind of like the gatekeeper. And they were behind me. I was kind of pushing them forward to Chris. And then the light was in the middle and the angel was down. So it was a very beautiful experience. And I will say, I'm going to start crying because this is my day. But the one thing that I remember the most about that is my family standing behind me, and they were really proud of me, like doing this. But also Liza, the woman that I channel, she's the woman that killed 2 of her children by putting them down the well and taking a straight razor and cutting her neck. She was there. She was holding up her child, and just seeing that, and like she was like, "Don't take me, take my child." And the fact that she did that was absolutely beautiful, and I will never forget that moment. So as someone as a clairvoyant psychic medium, and to be able to experience that, I would have not been able to do that without Chris or with Dave or with Luann.
Very cool. Any other quick questions? Yes.
Have you ever had a crew member who is either has a lot of chaotic energy where you kind of say, you need to step out so we can get the spirits through?
She wants to know if we've ever had a crew member with us that we've had to step away because their energy is so bad. We had some crew members that wouldn't shut the fuck up on set. We had to ask them. I'm not kidding, right? We were filming in one scene, and usually it's quiet on set. Dave's interviewing, and there's 2 people standing like at that wall, just having a full-blown conversation. And I'm trying to have this, and at one point I just stopped and I go, and the director goes, "Why are you stopping?" And I go, "Because they're having a conversation." "Don't worry about it. We can't even hear it." And I look over at the sound guy and he goes, and I go, "Can we just be quiet?" She's like, "Can you step out in the hall?" So they stepped around the corner and just kept talking. So I kept stopping production, and I'm like, I'm gonna talk. I can't focus on what they're saying because I'm listening. A lot of times when you're doing the interviews and you're talking about the spirits, stuff starts happening. You'll start hearing footsteps, you'll see stuff move around. So I've got to be in 2 places at once, and they're taking me totally out of the moment. So we finally got them to shut down. But on any of the shows I've been on, no. But I've been there when they are doing stuff. You've got the sound guy, and he starts hearing walking up behind him, and he can't leave his post, and he's doing right. got the camera, the boom mic over you, or camera guys. Our camera guys on Holzer Files were great. We would have shit moving around us all the time, and you could just see if there was something bad happening because you turn and look at the camera guy, and he'd have the camera up here, and his one eye would be, that you could see was wide open, and he's like, and it unnerved the hell out of him. But that was for me. How about you? Did you ever have people you have to remove from set?
I wouldn't say we've had to remove people from set, but we've had crew members that have been affected that we've had to remove. That they've had some type of energy that's attached to them and they're freaking out and they have to be removed from and then brought back. But the biggest thing, like Dave's saying, is there's a thing in production where either everything's contained with just the presenters and investigators, that whatever happens there happens. If it's outside of that, with the crew, some shows won't show that. I know when we did that with Psychic Kids, we were having stuff happen to crew members, and crew members were experiencing something or seeing something, but they didn't want to put that to show, and it was very frustrating to me. So when I did Help My House is Haunted, they said yes. I said, can I break the fourth wall? Can we have, if anything happens outside of us, can we discuss that? They said yes. So that was important to me. Same thing with Spook Scotland. I said, if I'm going to do this show, we have to be able to break the fourth wall. We have to be able to, if crew members have something happen, they're a part of our team, investigate. And sure enough, you got director of photography. He's filmed, interviewed guys from Rolling Stones, some of the presidents, from all different countries, everything. He was like, whoa, something happened to him. He says, I feel like I'm going to vomit. Something went right through me, and I'm so sick. He's like, I've never had that happen before. He's like, holy crap, this stuff was real. So you have these crew members that have the type of experiences that are very unique to viewers that just, oh, look at this shit. And then when they see crew members that have never had experience have their first experience, it just shows you how real this is. So for me, I'm like, why don't we just do that? If something happens, speak up. So what's cool is like we might be talking to a spirit and all of a sudden the sound guy goes, I just got distortion on all the mics. I said, okay, is that artifact? He's like, no, that doesn't happen. So we play it back and you hear this, and sometimes there's a little voice that's in between. And it's like in that static. So
Is that Yoda?
No, that is unheard. Dave sits next to me. Yes, he does. Anyway.
What was that one?
That was a mix between Kermit the Frog, Fozzie Bear, and Yoda. In a blender. So, Dave doesn't do Homer Simpson.
No.
Yes.
Anyway.
Okay, here's a story. It's funny. Let's just talk about funny stuff. Is me, Patrick Burns, and Dave, sometimes we did events, we would go to either McDonald's or some fast food place. He loves Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is all, genetically modified chicken. But anyway, funky chicken,
Real freak.
So, he would order with the voice of Homer Simpson. And it was, I'd be in the backseat crying and laughing so hard. And then we pull up, the guy would be like,
And let's face it, I fucking look like Homer Simpson. We pull up and it was a late night and we pulled up to one place and they said something I'd never heard before because we were in the South, right? I ordered a hot dog and the guy goes, how do you want it dressed? So as we're playing, Chris is like, do Homer. And now I feel like we've set it up, I'm not gonna hit it, but so as we pull up, I'd like to order 2 hot dogs, please. How would you like them dressed? They go, hey, top hat and tails. He stops and he goes, what? And I go, ketchup and mustard is fine. He put in a whole order like this, and I'm like, I go, all right, what do you want, Bart? And he's like, I'll take a cheeseburger and chicken nuggets and Jesus, I don't have that kind of money. We pull up and the guy looks at me and I hand him my card and he hands me the food. I'm like, thank you very much. Have a delightful evening. And he's giggling like a moron in the back seat. You'd have thought we were high. Or we'd go to White Castle. The best thing I've ever seen. White Castle, late night. Zach Baggins and Chris Fleming decide to go into a slider off. They both did the 24-pack and sat there and proceeded to eat them. And then neither one of their egos are too big to allow the other one to win, and they're both like pushing down number 18. And then Zach's like, not a problem, bro. And Chris is like, now mind you, one of the two is lactose intolerant. Should have had cheeseburgers, but you know, it was a fun ride home for the rest of us. But they said they're in a 24 sliders. That was the true paranormal part of our evening, watching that take place. My favorite parts of doing events when Ghost Adventures were with us is I could point them out. If you came into the event and you were gonna go ghost hunt with us, and you're during this part, you're okay, and then you show up to the ghost hunt in high heels, oh, she's gonna get possessed tonight. She's gonna need help from Zach. And every time, it was those girls that would walk in. I'm not judging on clothing. I could just tell. The sexier they acted and got, the more they were gonna get possessed as the night progressed. And there were a couple times, Chris, he's always good at helping people, but we start to see the identifiers, and the one girl's like, there's something taking over me. And Chris steps over her and goes, all right, let's go down here and do some EVP. She's rapping on the fucking floor. It's in me! And he's like, oh, then there's no room for me. I'll be back later. So we had those moments a lot, and we just all learned to kind of tune it out in the background. Although, turn off your cameras. I'll tell you guys one funny, stupid story. First one, we're at the Stanley Hotel, and we're having this big event, and there's a party the first night, and I'm 40-some years old, heavy-set, all kind of stunning Barbie blonde comes walking up to me at the end of the bar, and I'm sitting there and talking, and she just keeps getting closer, and my hand's on the bar, and she just starts rubbing on my hand and talking to me, and she's like, I have an idea. And I go, what's that? She goes, why don't I take you upstairs and take care of you? Ooh, the old man still got it. And after I do that for you, will you introduce me to Chris Fleming? Who is standing right there. And I look over and I go, really? I thought you were hitting on me because there was this magnet, this sheer animal magnetism. She's like, I really want to meet Chris Fleming. And I go, let's cut out the middleman. Hey, Chris! I turn around and I go, she wants to meet you really bad. And Chris looks at me and goes, okay, and walks over, and I walked away, and that was it. That was my favorite. I'm like, well, I became the paranormal roadie at these events. Right? Go hit on the slob, he'll get us backstage with the celebrities. Yes. So, but Chris, his husband, was willing to take that bullet that night. She's still filming even after we asked her not to. You're going to hell! All right, well, if you were the blonde, shame on you. All right, any last questions before we wrap up and get heading over? What time is it? 2:06. How long? Oh, still got time?
Yeah, that's like 2:30. Yes, right there.
Can you guys each share one of the most profound paranormal experiences you guys have ever had?
Wow. Yeah. So I think for me, the curse of Lizzie Borden was probably one of the most profound experiences. The reason why it was so profound was that I was having dreams like pretty much 2 weeks leading up to what was going on. So I knew we're about to battle darkness, and we're about to battle the devil, basically. And so I would wake up 3:15 in the morning, and I know that that's sort of like what you hear, but that's exactly what happened. So I would wake up 3:15 in the morning. And didn't you do that as well, Chris? Or you would wake up at 3 in the morning?
Yeah, we were all having a hard time sleeping. Yeah.
And I kept the journal throughout the whole time. So I think that when it comes to that experience was the most profound, but I also had an attachment that was featured in the 100th episode of A Haunting, where I was basically doing like a performance of Salem, and I was giving the backstory of Richard Crowninshill, who was a murderer in 1830, meeting all these murderers. But yeah, so basically I was telling a story, and he ended up jumping on my back, and I had an attachment for 8 days and had to be removed by a shaman. And what was horrific about that story is I in addition to I would go in and out of consciousness, but I also I levitated in my bed. So it was severe attachment. And if anyone has gone through an attachment, we can talk about it later, because it's something that it's kind of like the attachment club. You know, we can like hang out together. But it was horrible. But that also was another profound experience. And Speaking of a haunting, I was the producer of season 11 of A Haunting. And that's another show that's near and dear to my heart. And these guys that worked as talent, but as someone that works as a producer as well, I think having that perspective is really important to be a well-rounded person on camera and to be behind the camera as well. So that was my most profound experience.
Mine was real easy for me. I came from second season of Holzer Files, and we were in Ohio. We were filming 2 episodes back to back. One was at the train depot deal with the torso killer. And then the second episode, I thought, well, I'm gonna get a respite. We're not dealing with a serial killer ghost, right? And I didn't know much about the story except for what I'd read in Hans's book. And we were going to Franklin Castle in Ohio. And the morning I got up to go, do my first couple of interviews, I wake up and I'm flipping through my phone on my memories for the, day. And it's like 3 years ago on this date, 2 years ago on this date, whatever. And as I got to like 3 years ago, holy shit, there's a picture of me and my daughter in the hospital. She had almost died from complications due to diabetes. And I was just like, wow, man, 3 years already. How did that happen? And I go in and I sit down to do our interview that day, and I'm all set, we're ready, and we're in the library talking, and Shane is sitting with the directors. They're watching because Shane would take notes. I would take notes, and then he would take notes of things I brought up in case we need to look at them again later. And as we're talking, and she starts telling me about the spirits that are in this home, she starts telling me about the little girl. And I go, how did she die? Because back then, 1800s kids' life expectancies were not great. And she goes, actually she died from complications due to diabetes. And I'm like, oh. And then I just kind of sat there and glazed over as she's talking, and tears just start welling up in my eyes. And then I realized I'm back in it, and they've got a earbud in there, so there's a camera shooting directly at me, one here and one kind of over my shoulder. And I've got an earbud in my ear so that my director can contact me if he needs me to push on a question or ask something different. And all of a sudden I hear,
Are you okay, honey? Just nod if you're okay.
and then she keeps talking and she stops and she goes, and it was so tough that they ended up tearing down the old house and they built a new house kind of in front of it. There's only one part that kind of crosses into that property. But her father never really got over it. And then I started doing that. Right? And then they throw back to me to ask a question, and I'm doing my best to hold it together. Because again, I don't want to screw up this scene. She's telling great stories, all this stuff. And you can see her eyes getting bigger and bigger as she's telling me this story, and I'm totally holding back the ugly cries, right? I'm doing them. And she's looking at me, and the camera guy's looking at me, and the director's in my ear. And then finally, I try to get the one last question out I can get to, and I lose it. And I start sobbing. And I'm like, I'll be right back. And I stood up, took out my battery pack, and walked out the hall. And Shane comes running over. What's wrong, man? What's going on? And I told him, I said, Jesus Christ, this is the 3rd anniversary. I almost lost my daughter to diabetes. And he's like, ooh, are you all right? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. So he actually followed me in the bathroom and just stood there and helped me when I cried. It's tough, when you're put into a position that reflects your own life, it suddenly becomes real personal. It's not just about a ghost, right, or a story. And that's why in that story, people are really affected by the fact that Dee, the owner, wouldn't hear what we had to say. And we didn't fucking care that she didn't hear what we had to say. We weren't there for her, we were there for the ghosts. She and her family lied, and they destroyed a family name by telling these lies about this family. And this father and daughter, that was the story, and the mother and this family trying to stay together in this location. That was the story, and we got their story right. So that was important. And then they kept telling us, well, the little girl's ghost only appears to children. And we're all adults, so what are we going to do to communicate with this little girl? So I said, I have an idea. And I called my daughter.
She talked to ghosts.
She made 2 videos, just asking questions. What's it like to die? Did it hurt? stuff she wanted to know. And we got fucking amazing evidence that night because she was part of the story.
I saw that, it was very touching.
Yeah, so that one to me was the best because my daughter was involved. We helped this family, we helped put their story right. And truth be damned, right? That's why the episode is called The Final Word, because we put the final word. And what was really refreshing was it was hard because I stood up for Dee. Her family told her these stories. She believed these stories because this is what she grew up hearing. I told a story at Michigan Paracon, and one of the people came up to me afterwards and they go, "You gotta know, I went to school with Dee Romano." She was telling me this bullshit when she was a teenager, and she said how she was gonna write a book about it, and she was making up all these ghost stories. The actual stuff was true, the real stuff that was going on there. What they embellished, the murders and the raping the worker and then hiding the baby and putting it out to the sea when he, aborted it prematurely, just all this horrible shit that he supposedly did. There's no records of that. So we were able to keep that timeline now uncorrupt, which is what Dr. Holzer tried to do back then. And when he got thrown out the third time for visiting because the woman didn't want the truth revealed, that was really telling to us. So to me, that whole thing coming in cyclical and it all happens for a reason, right? Sam got the call to be on our show, Chris got the call, we all came together for a reason. For us to be there at that Franklin Castle that day and film Franklin Castle second, I wouldn't have gotten that same memory. I don't know if it would have impacted or affected me or made me think outside the box on how to get this spirit to communicate the way that it did. So to me, that's probably the most powerful of all the investigations of ghosts that we've done. But I love the fact that with Holzer Files, we got to set right what people's stories were twisted and turned into something else for profit. So that's why I think I keep doing this, is let's tell the real story. Let's let the voices, even those that we may not appreciate and like, let their history be told, not the twisted version that gets put out there. So I'm going to turn the microphone over so Chris can tell you a story, and I'm going to go blow my nose and wipe my face.
Thank you, Dave. I really don't even want to say anything after that, because I know Dave for so long, and I know, we talk to many spirits, but when it involves family members, either the close we have with death or not, it's very touching. And so Sam, thank you for sharing your story, and Dave, thank you for yours. Josiah, when you say profound, explain, like, profound in, because I've got elemental experiences, I have demonic experiences, angel experiences, I had experience with my father after he died. So, share with me.
I would say if you flip up the coin in the air, what would be the one that you would point to? It's like that one.
There's so many, and the first time I saw this pixie elemental that appeared, I could talk about aliens, I could talk about, when I died, went to the other side, came back, it's tough. But I think because Dave touched about family, I'll talk about my dad. One thing we could say where your abilities come from, my mom always had visions, dreams that would come true, stuff like that. And my grandmother, my mom's side, had the same thing. My mom never saw a ghost, but she could feel there was always something coming for her. My dad always chose to ignore it. But what I found later in life, because my dad used to say when stuff would happen in our house growing up, he says, ignore them, they'll go away. It's just your imagination. Just don't pay attention to it. But he would always say, in between stuff like that, just ignore it. Ignore what? So when he was older, he had a stroke and a heart attack, and he was semi-paralyzed for 5 years. We talked about everything, I said, Dad, remember when the ghosts, I used to see ghosts in the house and everything? He says, Chris, there's no such thing as ghosts. I said, what do you mean, Dad? You reacted to it. You jumped off the bed. Everything was Chris. They're just people. People. So you mean to tell me, when I walk into the room and there's this ghost/person to the left, you saw it too? He's like, yeah. Why didn't you say anything? He says, Chris, I didn't have a problem with them. You did. I said, Dad, but I needed you as support. And I'm telling him this. I said, if you weren't in that bed, I'd put you in that bed. Right? He says, Chris, I was playing hockey at the end of my career, trying to find out what team was going to pick me up again. you know, your mother and I were having some problems. I didn't put food on the table. I got to get a good night's sleep and work tomorrow. I don't have time for that. You're the one that was always paying attention. That's why I said ignore it. It'll go away. But it always kept coming back because you were paying attention to it. So that was a nice little release. And it was very profound for me to understand that, okay, my dad chose to ignore it. My grandmother, his mother, said, we don't talk about that stuff. But my great-grandma had experiences, but I couldn't talk to her because she was Polish, 100%. So she didn't speak any English. But the nice thing about the situation of my dad having a stroke and heart attack, even though it's horrible to have something happen, is it gave us 5 years where he wasn't going anywhere. He was just sitting there watching TV, but we would have these conversations that we got to discuss. I said, Dad, do you want to know what it's like on the other side, in the life after death? Because I'll communicate with spirits. And he goes, yeah, sure. So I told him, I said, Dad, you don't think about your body. If you want to get from this part of the room to the other part of the room, just don't think that you got to walk there and say, I want to be there, I'm going to be there. And you're there because you're particles. You're just, boom, you go right there. So I told him about local communication, non-local communication, what it's like in the spirit world, stuff. So I remember as time went on, the doctor says he shouldn't even be alive. He's had all these other complications. He's lived farther than anybody else. People with his condition don't live past 2 years. You know, my dad's on his 5th year. Twice I've gone in there to tell my dad to let go. I said, Dad, just, you know, yeah, I was going to do it, I couldn't do it. And I think he knew because he touched my head and said, son, when you're ready to tell me, you'll tell me. I said, Dad, I just can't do it. So I remember the last time I told my mom, told my sister, I'm going to tell him to let go, you know, because his wife died and there was just nothing else for him to do. So I went in there and I said, Dad, do you want to go home? He said, what do you mean? I said, pack your bags, go home. He's like, what about you and Kelly? I said, oh my God, I told you that. We're going to be fine. Do you want to go home where Grandma is and everybody else? He says, yeah. I said, right, Dad. Then let go. He touched my cheek. He said, be strong. 6 days later, remember, he's been alive for 5 years. 6 days later, I go visit him, and he's curled up. He didn't look good. And they were feeding him. I said, hey, son. I said, love you, Dad. Love you, too. I said, Dad, I'm not going to stay very long. I got a date tonight and everything. I'll talk to you later. He said, all right, I love you. And I start to walk out, and the boy says, that's the last time you're going to see him alive. I said, what? So I walked back in. I'm looking at him like, this is Friday. I have to do this tomorrow. I said, all right, Dad, I'm going to come back Sunday and see you. He's like, okay, so I'll see you. I walk out. I just had this weird feeling. I remember looking back. The next morning, 9 in the morning, phone call. My sister, he's dead. And I'm like, what? She's like, he wasn't responsive, so they took him to the emergency hospital, and he never made it. And I'm sitting there going, they were telling me. But I remember my dad and I talked about death. You know, what am I going to say for him, all this, and we talked about life after death. And he said, be strong. Be strong. So I went to the hospital with my best friend, because he was at the house, and then my stepdad came over because I wasn't answering the phone from my mom. I just didn't want to talk to her. So my stepdad, myself, and my best friend go to the hospital, Northwest Community Hospital, Huntington Heights. We go to the front, chaplain comes out, he says, I'll take you to see your father. So we go down this long corridor. We're walking down this long corridor, I'm numb, I'm just thinking, be strong, be strong, be strong. And I look at the end of the hallway, I said, who the hell is that? I see some guy at the end of the hallway standing there, wearing like you wear when you're a patient, you know? But his hair is brown, this kind of cut, butch cut, old 70s type cut. And I look and I'm like, that's my dad when he was 30 years old. My dad died at 73. It was the best vision I have, the best memories of my father was at that age, right? Because I remember he used to come home from hockey and say, oh, Dad, and run in the driveway, pick me up, hug, you know, always have a little gift for me and my sister or something. And I'm like, no way I'm seeing this, no way. And then I see him become semi-transparent and the chaplain walks right through him. I said, I'm in shock. We just got there and I saw my dad. We go into the emergency room, chaplain's like, the body's here somewhere, and I look at this door that's closed and I put my hand here, he's in here. Chaplain opens it up, there's my dad's body. Now if anybody's seen a body when they're dead, it's terrible. I mean, it's dried up to like, you know, it looks like they lost 20 pounds. I mean, I'm sitting there going, Jesus. So he says, I'll leave you in here with him. He walks out, I bawl. I'm in mourning, I'm like, oh my God, you know, and I'm like, no, I don't want to look at this. Dad, we talked about this. I know you can hear me. You owe me. All those years, you owe me. So I sit down, I said, I'm not leaving till we make contact. Now I know I just saw him, but I want physical contact. So I'm sitting there, and I guess I was there for 2 hours, did not even know. I'm not looking at the body, I'm just thinking about everything we talked about. All of a sudden the chaplain comes in, And he says, Mr. Fleming, I'm sorry, I don't mean to rush you or anything, but he's trying to be polite. He is trying to rush me. But we need to know what you're going to do with the body. Are you going to be getting it cremated? Do you need to take it somewhere to be buried? And I'm sitting there going, shit, my dad always told me to do whatever you want to do. So I look at him, and all of a sudden, boom, well, something hits the wall, and the wall starts shaking. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, what the hell? It's like an earthquake. But your mind goes, it's not an earthquake because the chair's not shaking, this is not shaking, just that wall is shaking. So we're both looking at the wall, and I'm looking at him like, what the hell's going on? So like this. And then he says, it must be construction or something, and then it settles down. I'm like, it's like poltergeist activity. So I'm not putting two and two together yet. So then I look at the man again, he starts with me, listen, I'm sorry that your father is dead. Boom! The other wall starts shaking. Now there's a monitor on the wall that starts shaking violently. And there's these rubber tubes and stuff that start flapping, like something you see out of a sci-fi movie. Now we're both looking at each other going, are we actually seeing this? Then the wall starts to like, I don't want to say buckle, but it starts to like kind of stick out. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I used to tell my dad about particles and how the walls are and this and that. You become one with an object to move it. And I'm sitting there going, there's no freaking. And all of a sudden I feel my dad's anger as immediate, as empathy. And I remember my dad used to get mad. I said, my dad is not dead. He's pissed off. He said he's dead. He's here right now. And the shepherd was like, he races out of there. My best friend is standing behind him, and he sees the wall doing all this stuff, and he shuts the door. He says, I don't know what the hell's going on. He shuts the door. And I'm sitting there going, Dad, are you mad at me? Are you mad at him? Calms down. I'm like, all right. Make contact, Dad. I put my arm out. Make contact. Dad, you owe me. We talked about this, and I got tears streaking. And all of a sudden I started feeling this swirling wind going around my hand. I'm like, oh my God, good. Keep doing it, Dad. Keep doing it. It's getting nice cold. And all of a sudden it slows down, and then I feel like a hand touch my hand and drag across. And then I go, yes! And I put my hand down. I go, we did it. Yes! At that moment, my girlfriend at the time is walking in. She opens up the door. I'm like, yes! And then she's like, sees his body and sees me. She's like, okay, should I leave? I said, no, come here. She's like, what's going on? I look at her and I'm smiling. She's like, you made contact. I said, yep. She's like, okay, I'm gonna leave now. And she leaves. And I'm sitting there going, we did it. Freaking did it. The day he dies. So I get up, I open up the door. I said, who's hungry? And they're looking at me like, so we go eat, start getting the phone calls. We heard your dad died. Can you give us an interview? This next. My dad played professional hockey for 13 years. Here's the incredible thing. That was incredible. The next week, at the funeral, my friend Doug Bimbo, who I played baseball with, was a nurse there that day. He's the one that called me and told me my dad's body was there. He was there. He says, can I talk to you? I said, yeah, I'm just trying to get people who's going to help carry the casket. He's like, Chris, spoke to the chaplain and everybody else in the emergency room, and I was in the emergency room that day. The rest of the emergency room wasn't shaking. That room was shaking. I said, yeah, I know. I said, Chris, there's no construction going on. That's never happened before. The entire emergency room experienced that. So whatever happened in that room, happened. I said, Doug, it was my dad. He played hockey. He was checking the walls. And so from that moment, I'm like, Dad, we did it. And then I'm like, fuck all the skeptics. And at that moment, it was like, be strong, be strong. So when I go into the paranormal, you'll see in like the shows that I do now, it's like, I got this. And then like with him, saying my dad was coming through, my dad showed up because his dark stuff was going to be there, and something was happening with my mom. It's like, I got friends behind me now, and I got my dad behind me now, for what I do. So I'm fearless. And that's the thing about the paranormal, is that we're going to lose our loved ones. So I tell people, if you have the opportunity, speak to them before they pass. Talk to them about the afterlife. Talk to them about making contact. Talk to them. Give them permission to make contact. I gave my dad permission, and he knew how important that was. Now, we have experiences all the time. Last night he said, I love you, and it was saying something about my dad on the ITC app.